has done it! What a goal! He shoots, he scores!
Welcome to the Evolution of Fandom, hosted by CTS's very own Kyle Eichman. And in this sports podcast, we explore how fan behavior is changing and how leagues, teams, media companies, and sponsors can build more valuable relationships with fans.
Hi, I'm Kyle Eichman, Sports Market Director here at Comcast Technology Solutions. Welcome back to the Evolution of Fandom. Today, we're discussing how fan expectations are changing and why younger audiences expect content to find them, not the other way around. Joining me today is Greg Bobolo, CEO of SEVN, to talk about content discovery, personalized experiences, and what sports organizations can learn from today's evolving media landscape. Greg, thanks for joining me. And let's start out by you giving us a quick intro and tell us a little bit about SEVN and what y'all do.
Fantastic. Well, first off, Kyle, thank you so much for having me on today, and thank you for taking the time. Also, congrats on the success of your podcast. Quick overview of SEVN. SEVN is an acronym. It stands for Sports and Entertainment Video Network, and we're building the infrastructure for the next generation of media distribution. So we're doing that in a messaging-powered media network for live sports and entertainment. We do that with direct-to-fan video infrastructure. We distribute and build a layer that is built really custom for live events and enables teams, leagues, artists, and brands to deliver highlights and real-time content instantly via direct messaging. And the platform effectively turns live moments into interactive, measurable fan engagement opportunities while capturing that valuable first and zero-party data.
Great description. Obviously love the platform, which is why we're here chatting today. So, I'll jump right in and ask you a question that is probably on everybody's mind right out of the gate, and we won't save it for later on. But when you look at SEVN, what do you think the main problem you're trying to solve for teams, leagues, associations, or other entities that are in sports?
Yeah, well, I think that historically, like for me, Kyle, like career-wise, I've always followed these consumption trends. And I started off, as you know, in the short form video world. I've been doing this for the better part of almost 2 decades now, which is kind of scary. And it was the early days of the internet, and began distributing short form video content over the internet, which, if you remember those days, it was like really clunky and bouncy. Like you would log on and the video wouldn't quite work so well, and you have like multiple video players going, and it was just quite chaotic. And that was the early stage of video on the internet. And then enter in the sports component, began working with these sports teams and leagues, and putting official highlights on .coms around the world. And that became a massive video network in and of itself. But it was really helping folks get over that problem, which was, and it's crazy to me today, because people looking back go, really, this is what they're saying to us, like, is video going to be a big deal on the internet? Do you think it's actually going to become a thing? And I said, yeah, I think so. And it just seems so crazy to me now, right? It's like, obviously it's a massive, part of the internet. In fact, probably one of the biggest parts is video. And so that was one component, in terms of that fan behavior, and then moved into this world of social. And there was a notion that young folks weren't consuming as much sports content as their older predecessors. And again, took a different point of view on that, and disagreed with it, that they were in fact consuming as much and probably more just across these core and emerging social media platforms. And so again, this change in terms of media consumption being across these social media platforms. And so you have to adjust to create new forms of distribution to engage those fans where they're already consuming that content. And so that was kind of the second solve. And now at Seven Sports and Entertainment, we see a future state that is more akin to a need for instant reward. I think that by and large, fans' expectations, certainly the younger generation of fans, expect that content to come to them. They don't want to go and search and discover that content. They expect immediacy. They have a very low attention span. I've heard as low as 1.2 seconds and you lose their attention. So that's not a lot of time, to
Wow. Yeah.
to find a fan's attention. And I think in this world of artificial intelligence and all the things that are going on that weren't really part of our discussion, or wouldn't have been part of our discussion in the last two networks that I was a part of, it creates a very dynamic environment. And so I think helping these sports teams and leagues build out infrastructure where they can build relationships direct to fans and enable that video content to move through in a very lightweight way where there's not a lot of friction. I think the name of the game for us is low friction, low friction, low friction. How do we do that? How do we build relationships direct to fans in a way that creates very minimal friction, arrives content to get to them in a way that is lightweight and fast, especially when you're talking about these moments that happen in any particular game or sport. We've seen the moment, increasingly become, more of the product. And so how do we get that product in the hands of the fans as fast as possible is really what we're looking to achieve at Seven.
Yeah, that's great. And let's continue talking about the fan because, after all, everything we're talking about here is fandom related, fan engagement, all of those things. So we'll dig a little deeper into the tech later on. But one of the things you said, well, let me back up. So the episode that we had prior to this one, we spent a lot of time talking about rented real estate, rented screens, third party sites, which could be TikTok, Facebook, some of those other things, and how fans consume data. And I think one of the things you said I'd like you to expand upon, which is super interesting to me, right? That fans under 40, let's just use that as a definition, right? Fans under 40 expect the content to come to them versus the other way around. So can you talk about what trends you're seeing within fandom and how fans in that younger demo that everybody's trying to capture, right? And trying to suck in and make them loyal and all those things. And what are you seeing them do? And then second piece of that is how does Seven fit into that ecosystem and do that for the team in the league? And don't want to ramble a little bit, but I like the whole idea of everything being frictionless. It's like one of the organizations I was at before when we looked at anything that we did that was fan engagement driven or fan forward, if you will, was always seamless, frictionless, and intuitive. If you didn't have those three things, then we wouldn't look at the tech and we wouldn't implement it. So long rambling thing, but talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing within the younger demo and how Seven fits that need.
Sure. Well, I mean, to your point, I think the stat is somewhere in the neighborhood of 65% of the world's population is under the age, rather, of 40 years old. And so I think it's a logical place to have a bit of a chat around or discussion around. I also find it very interesting that in our world of sport executives, most of the people that are making all the decision in terms of how fans consume content are significantly older than that
Yes.
that
Yes.
generation, and may not completely understand how they consume content. And so there may be a bit of a disconnect there. We have a lot of people, on our team and have come from an environment that was working with a lot of young folks. So I do find that interesting. Also of interest, I think any individual that has a phone going into a stadium, it's going to be north of 95% of people going into a stadium will have a phone, and they will be using that phone in one way, shape, or another. Most individuals have 80 to 90 different applications on their phone, and they will be using less than 5 of those on any kind of a regular basis. And so just to set the stage in terms of the demographics and some of the decision making and the behavior amongst those demographics and the tools you have to actually access them. And so within those 5 applications, one of the most used would be the messaging app. And we believe that the future of fan consumption within that demographic and beyond, to an extent, will be within those messaging applications. And so when we talk about how we work with teams and how we work with leagues, it's about enabling those channels to fire and doing it in a way that solves for a bunch of other problems. So take content in a stadium, for example. When was the last time there was ever really an evolution of content in stadium? You've seen infrastructure and hardware, you've seen screens and bigger jumbotrons.
Yep.
But when has it really evolved, and when has the fan ever had agency to consume that content? I've heard a couple times people refer to us as that jumbotron in your pocket, and I love that, because
That's great.
it's kind of like, and that's the world that we live in. Like, why can't fans be able to access the content when they want it, in a way that they want to consume it, in a way that they already are consuming it, which is within these messaging applications. And so in a stadium, just to give you, a use case, like, Kyle, you and I go to a game, we're going to be chatting like we're chatting here about all sorts of stuff, what's going on in the sports world, catching up, and we're going to miss moments that happen in that particular game. We may go to buy some food and some drinks and hopefully some merchandise for whatever team that we're attending, for their benefit. And we just miss a lot of things that happen. Or there may be scenarios where, maybe we saw something and we want to watch that again. Is it going to be on the screen? Is it not? Even if it is, it's going to be there fleeting. It's going to be ephemeral, and so we'll miss it. And I see fans all the time, holding up these and, until their arms get sore, trying to capture moments, just to be able to share it. And let's be honest, we're not the best videographers of the world. Like, we can pretend that we are, we're just not. And so getting high quality content direct to a fan in the moment that actually happens, and enabling them to share it with their friends, there's a lot of value there. And in order for us to do that, there's the capture of first party data, zero party data, and that is, that's the oil of the future state of the sports industry. And these are all buckets. The inventory that we generate, if a fan is watching a piece of video content in stadium, it's in video inventory. It is capturing first and zero party data. It is real. It is live. And so these are all big buckets. It's kind of a holy grail from a sponsorship and an advertising perspective.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we generated a meaningful amount of new inventory and revenue for the teams that we work with. But ultimately, and I think you're going to see this across sport in general, is just a better fan experience. You need new tech. You need technology like this that's going to create a better fan experience. I think you're going to see a world in the future that has companies like ours coming in and enabling these things for teams and leagues, but ultimately for fans. It's just going to be a better world. And I think when you look at might be rambling here a bit, but when you look at the future of media, right, whether it be Hollywood and movies and television and the music industry and sports, sports is kind of that last man. That's the last man standing, the one that has the human element to it where others don't. And so with that durability, I think you're going to see all of these things become stronger and better, but you need technology to help enable that. And fans are going to have a better experience ultimately in the world of sports, wherever their fandom lies.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I like the whole idea that innovation within a venue really hasn't moved outside of hardware, right? Because when you're talking about, okay, new sophisticated point of sale systems, great ribbons, great jumbotron, all of that. Well, all that is taking old school technology, because everybody's always had a jumbotron. They've always had some level of a ribbon or a screen, and it was just moving that up the tech stack, right? But nobody is ever or guilty of stepping back and saying, okay, how can we make the experience different? And I think somewhere in the notes or something, I saw something about you're turning the arena into a big digital experience, right? And that goes to meeting fans where they expect to consume content. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I think you'll appreciate this. I was going through your product and talking about how it works in venue and the sponsorship aspect and everything. And he's like, let me stop you right there. He goes, after you described this to me, I can't believe this hasn't been out here. This seems like a no-brainer to me. Like, why have teams and leagues not embraced this and looked at it? Because it's a whole new way of meeting the fans in the venue and giving them content. And then he went further, because he was involved in some stadium builds, and he said, when we were looking at the latest stadium that we built, we actually challenged or questioned ourselves on, do we need a jumbotron? And it went back to what you said about 90% of the fans in the building have a phone. They're on the phone. You set back, and if you're in a suite or something up high and you look down, everybody's on their phone doing different things on the phone. He said fans consume content on their mobile devices, not via a jumbotron. So they had serious conversations about, do we put iPads in the seats? Do we put some other kind of interactive device and just do away with the jumbotron? Because that's where eyes go and that's where people look. And one of the other things I know you and I have talked about, and I'll turn this into a question, and I'm rambling a little bit too, but the whole idea, you mentioned it, right? You and I are in the stadium, and we're conversing like we are now. We're interacting with our phone, and we go do stuff, whatever it is, whether you go up to get a beer, you go up to do whatever, and you miss something. And teams are guilty of this. There's nowhere for a fan to go back and instantly see that moment they missed. And now you've given them that tool is sitting there, so I don't have to worry about interacting somewhere else in the stadium for fear I'm going to miss the goal, or I'm going to miss, that final shot or the touchdown or the field goal, whatever element it is, because fans always look at, I'm in the moment. I want to share the moments. I want to understand the moments. And going back to how they consume the content, it's on their mobile device, not on a jumbotron, right? So we've walked through all of this. So one of the question is give me and everybody listening a rundown of how SEVN is integrated into the fan experience in the building, because I think they'll find this super interesting. So kind of walk me through the fan journey or the fan experience in the building with the platform that is SEVN.
Sure. First, look, I'll say that in terms of teams giving fans a place to experience these moments, I think there's been effort, to do it. I think that there's been some ways via team apps and whatnot, but I think team apps are great, but a different environment for these real-time moments. And I think the way that the SEVN infrastructure works and how we integrate in stadiums, if you look at the data, and I think team app usage during a game is going to be less than 10%, and across the board on average, just not a lot of people using an application during a game. They're using it for other things, which is great, and what they're predominantly built for. And then if you look at a conversion from a push notification, from a phone, you're looking at 1 to 2% conversion. And so that is just not an application that we felt was suitable. And in terms of what we're bringing to stadiums around the world and to teams and to fans is an environment that integrates, as I mentioned, within applications that don't require any friction, so no downloading of an app, to send that video moment, that highlight to you via your phone, and it comes to you in a messaging application, which is, by the way, in comparison, there's a 95 to 98% conversion rate when you get a WhatsApp or when you get a text message. Like it is crazy high in terms of the differentiation between the two. And then once in that environment, what you're getting from a fan is something very akin to any other, environment that fans experience in the social world, where we take a fan as fast as possible from that moment happening, into that value component, which is like the watching of it. They can scroll through and they can consume all sorts of other content, moments that they may have missed, or just moments that they want to see. Perhaps we have multiple integrations that are continuing to flow in additional content. I think when you're a fan, the passion is fascinating to me. What drives us to want to watch somebody put a ball in the back of the net, or a puck in the back of the net, or a ball in the basket. And the passion component is often undervalued, and I see it all the time. Saw it in the last 2 networks we built out. We're seeing it now in terms of consumption via messaging. Once fans get into a certain environment, it's their team, it's their love, it's their passion, and they just consume so much content. And I think it's this, like, wow, where was all this before? We had, and I won't name names, but one senior sport executive, kind of like your story, Kyle, that I informed, what we're building here, and he said, "You know what this is like?" He says, "This is like a cup holder, like one of these things where was that? Where did I put my drink before, and I can see," he was like, "I can see, where before, giving easy access to all of this content, sort of, like that Jumbotron in your pocket sort of concept. I think fans will look back and go, yeah, what happened before this? Did you not actually have access to this? Was that a thing?"
You got it. You're going to have to use cup holder in your sales materials now, right?
Yeah. Well, I've used it a couple of times in conversations. I don't know if it's landing or not, but hopefully it lands here. But I get, the concept is that a lot of times there's these solutions out here that do seem very obvious, and I have heard that your example is one that we hear a lot. Why doesn't this exist? Almost with a level of concern. Like, is there a reason why this doesn't exist? Like, why hasn't somebody built this before?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I think that's you're spot on in everything. And the other piece, when you talk to teams and leagues and everybody in this space and broadcasters and all that stuff that's going on, it's like sports is content, and content is your number one asset, and something that you should hold near and dear to your heart instead of renting out to those other third-party platforms, right? So just kind of circling back on that what you offer gives them more in-arena control of the content. And we were talking before, and I've been in meetings, and I think you have too, where it's like, look, do you want a fan who is not the greatest videographer ever, shooting the moment or what happened in the game, and then posting it out on Facebook, right? Because the quality's not good. It's not the best representation of your brand and the content that you should hold near and dear to your heart. When you look at something like SEVN, it's like, well, great. Here's broadcast grade highlights, content, whatever you want to call it, that a fan can now curate and put out into those rented platforms in those spaces, right? So really all it does is elevates your brand and gets more of that great content out there and feeds the passion and makes people want to be there and do all that kind of stuff. So it literally touches on almost all the main key things that teams should be focused on in venue. Like you said, it's almost like you're a Swiss Army knife. I know we're throwing a lot of things out there right now. You're a cup holder, you're a jumbotron in the pocket, you're a Swiss Army knife. But you look at all the stuff going on in the building, and being able to give them content where they consume it is huge, right? Not to mention, it's another responsible asset too. So you tie everything up in a nice big ribbon from kind of my perspective. Right.
I love the Swiss Army knife analogy, aside from the fact that I never used anything other than the knife, maybe the scissors. But just touching on that, the videographer component and the lack of maybe skill and talent and brand protection and brand control. I just wanted to add to, like, it occurred to me a while back, but anytime I'm watching a playoff or any meaningful game, or any game for that matter that has something notable happening, you see, and I think we've all been there, where you see fans capturing moments, to your point, and sharing it, and that goes off into the social. It is such a missed opportunity. And you talk about these teams and leagues as being content creators and brand marketers. It's just crazy to me that and we're helping sports teams do this now, but like giving the fan access to high quality video content and being in control of that now, and enabling that fan to share that piece of content. Now who's sharing it. Now where that content is traveling to. So you're kind of going the other way to the social media platforms. You're building a robust first and zero-party fan database that is going to reduce your ad spend, because if you're spending on social, that's just going to keep going up and up, and you need to build out this owned audience, which is your rented point that you were discussing earlier, and creates not only inventory, very valuable inventory in stadium, it creates all this inventory now, across these social media platforms that you've never had before. Now, you're not going to capture 100% of the fans in your stadium, but you're going to get a lot, and they're going to be fans that you never had before, and maybe even fans that you didn't know were there oftentimes. And with digital ticketing, this became better now, right? We now know more who's sitting in the seat, but you still don't know exactly who's in the seat. And this is also going to help on that. So, with those additional sort of levers and pieces, very relevant to the Swiss Army knife. But really important, I think, if I'm running a team and I'm wanting to, protect my brand, I'm wanting to be, in a future state ahead of the curve. I want to build first party data. I want to create a better fan experience, and I want to create more meaningful inventory. These are all key components to that.
Yeah. Yeah, Swiss Army knife. I'm going to highlight the other piece in there that I think is super important. So at Comcast, we talk about unknown fans, and we've given them a name, right? We call them ghost fans. And what I like about your platform is, and you can, if you've been in leagues and around sports long enough, I can figure the metric. It's like something like 2.3 seats per account, right? Is what it used to be in the NBA. So by default, 1 out of every 2.3 people in the building, right? And we'll just run with that and round it up, say it's 33% or whatever. So teams are always trying to figure out who is in their building. So when you look at, again, something that is frictionless and something that everybody wants, I'll just say you're going to double the number of fans in the building, because who's going to walk in the building, see a piece of marketing collateral or an engagement QR code or whatever it is, right? And say, I don't want in-game highlights. I don't want in-game streaming video. I don't want any of that. That's going to be the first place they go to. So again, you're building your database, you're building your first party data, you're giving the fans something they want. So I'm going to take that and pivot now to the other piece that I find super fascinating and that teams always gravitate to, right? You talk about monetizing content, driving sponsorship. Talk a little bit about how SEVN is a fantastic sponsorable asset and what it opens up to teams that leverage the platform.
Sure. I mean, I think, as I mentioned, just the inventory itself is kind of that holy grail. It's live video content with first party data capture and social sharing with tracking, and so at scale to highly desirable fan bases that are in arena. But the point is, it's actually live. We have, I believe, 34 or 35 different components that make up our sponsorship and advertising inventory. And so that ranges anything from, video interstitials, pre-roll,
Sure.
mid-rolls, ed rolls, and packages where you can own that entire experience. So once you're consuming that video content, it can be completely wrapped with a brand, for example, and so that experience can be very, very full, right from soup to nuts, so to speak, with respect to the experience that the fan has when they're navigating within it. Or it can be as light as the brought to you buys, or things of that nature. And it's built for short form consumption as well. We have the interstitials that are a little bit shorter. We don't want to overrun the fan. We don't want to abuse a relationship. And so that value exchange is important to us as well. We understand the brand needs
Sure.
to get their messaging across, but akin to other platforms, some of this we haven't reinvented. We study data, we study ad inventory, and we look at
Right.
shorts in terms of not just our video content, but our ad units as well. Is a 3 to 5 second, performing well? It's going to be, what are those, the evolution? And there's good evidence to show that, those stand along nicely with short form video content. And I personally, like, being in video for a long time, I like it to be good value creation for, all stakeholders. And I think the trade-off has to be fair. I just, asking fans to sit through, very long commercial breaks in
Right.
an ad
Right.
heavy environment, it's,
Yeah.
it's a
Right.
lot. And I think that we as a company want to make sure that it's balanced.
Right. So playing off of that, so North America hosted the world's largest soccer event this summer, right? So I'm going to ask everybody listening to the episode to put on their business hat for a minute. Think about Seven, and think about the opportunity if a platform like that was installed in stadiums across North America over that 3 week, 4 week window, whatever it is, and the passion and everything that fan base is showing, and what they could do to propel the brand forward, sponsorable assets, and all of those other things. I mean, what an interesting use case, business case to talk about how you all could have made that event much different, and quite frankly probably a little bit better for all the fans, right? I mean, there was a lot of money spent going to those matches, and giving them consumable content on their mobile device where they could be proud and be loud about the moments they experienced in those buildings is just super cool to me. So no question or anything on that. Just wanted to make a statement because I know that that particular event continues to be top of mind with everybody, right? But I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add about how you view that event or anything. I just think it would have been an absolutely fantastic use case for your platform.
I think all these milestone global events that happen, every couple of years, across sport are very interesting, examples of, the latest and greatest in what's possible. I think that there's definitely room for innovation and definitely room to improve. And I hope that the viewers start to demand that the agency to consume more content in it, whether it be a major tentpole global event or your regional event. I think that it is something that is needed and achievable, and will just make your day at that stadium, ballpark, field, what have you, better. And I think that everyone will be happy, including myself, because it was one of those things for me, Kyle, where, early on, I said, why hasn't somebody built this? It's frustrating for me. I've had multiple, on multiple occasions been in this scenario where I've been without and then had to try and go and discover and ultimately gave up. So
Right.
I think it's very applicable for those major global events and especially the brand sponsors coming in to support it.
Yeah. No argument for me in any of those points at all. So a little bit of a pivot. I know you and your team went to Cannes Lions earlier this summer. I'm jealous, and I think everybody else on the production team is as well. But maybe next year, like we talked about. So that is a everybody comes together globally. There's a lot of really great ideas share. There's strategy and all those things you would expect it happens in an event that size. So any 2 or 3 takeaways, anything that you thought was super interesting coming out of that festival and that discussion that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I mean, I think the amount of sports organizations that were there this year is very, very strong signal. And as it relates to the sports business, just the fact that, people are talking about wanting to get, whether it be conversations, I overheard this CMO here, the CMO here, right? These are the biggest brand marketers on the planet. Really said, how do we get more, sports content? How do we get more involved in the sports world? And I think that was just a general undertone that I saw, there in person. I overheard conversations. I don't think it was coincidental given the amount that I overheard and the emphasis on first party data becoming a real moat. It is, it's true. And I think people are starting to buy into that. I think impressions as well. A lot of people talking about impressions being out and outcomes being in,
Interesting.
and so really leaning in and focusing on that aspect. Obviously AI, but to the extent that AI is not a strategy, it is a tool, and leaning in on conversations surrounding that narrative versus how certain people are kind of talking about it. So yeah, those are some big trends, but by and large was just generally encouraged with the amount of our business here within the sports world, how often it was discussed and what the appetite is. It just made me feel like this is a great time to be working in the sports industry, and there is a huge focus for good reason, I think. So coming out, those are a few of my takeaways.
Great. So couple more questions, and then we'll wrap this episode up. So you have your crystal ball. You're looking 3 to 5 years down the road. Where do you see sports and in-venue streaming going in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think that we need technology to, be ushered in to improve the overall experience in sport. And I see in-venue experience, in-venue streaming becoming more and more prolific, where fans will have the optionality to consume content when they want to consume it and where they want to consume it, where they're already consuming it. I believe that this whole sort of idea around, live short form, networks and direct to fan will become a reality, just the same way that we have that world existing in long form, broadcast distribution through to fans. The fans have already made up their decision for the most part, or the consumer, not just the fan. They've decided already where they want to consume the content, and it's up to us as people that build technology infrastructure, rights holders, to meet them where they're already consuming content. And so that's on us. And I think that within the next 5 years, the world of sport and entertainment is going to become much better from a fan experience perspective.
Right.
I think that it's going to become more profitable. I think costs are going to be going down. I think all of these things are going to be happening in the world for us. So from a business perspective, from a brand perspective, and then from a fan perspective, like all things are looking good, like the better than
Right.
they've ever looked. I think because of the durability of sport and because of the human element that none of the other pillars of entertainment really have, and so that's why I think, there's going to be a lot more dollars flowing into this world. There already is. You can see it today. I don't think it's going to stop, and I think it's going to be better for all the stakeholders. And I think the other industries are going to, have a bit of a challenge figuring out how to, consume that fan in the way that the world of sport can and does,
Right.
and will in the future.
Yeah. That's great. So, we'll wrap it up now. And I'm a big takeaway guy. So I'm gonna give everybody listening my quick takeaway, and then I'm gonna let you in the episode with your main takeaway for everybody listening. So, theme of this podcast is evolution of fandom. And when you look at in-venue streaming, highlights, content consumption, that is something that I think everybody needs to look at. There's huge room for improvement. The fans are begging for it. The way that fans consume content that fits very, very nicely into that conversation. So I would challenge everybody listening to look at your in-game, in-venue experience and take a step back and look at products like the Sevens platform and see if there's something you can do to take your in-venue fan experience to the next level. So that's kind of my words of wisdom, or my takeaway on everything. And I'm going to punt to you to bring this home and give everybody one more nugget of wisdom.
Oh, over to me. More wisdom for me. Well,
more wisdom.
Look, I think I'll leave on the note that one from a fan and then one from a partner perspective. I think, and I've always been absolutely mind blown and often wrong about the amount of video fans consume when placed into these environments. I've done it through 2 different networks, and we're seeing evidence of that here. Fans love short form video content, and teams and leagues around the world, you have a ton of it, and it needs to be distributed to fans. And we help you distribute those moments to fans. We help you monetize it, and we help you glean incredibly valuable information from the data that we actually collect. And so I would just leave with that nugget that this world is far, far greater than I think certain people imagine, because I look back at, the first network through to the web, distribution, the second through to social. Once fans started consuming, it was unbelievable how much content, like our numbers were always blown out of the water. I can see it happening here already. And so what that means is incredibly valuable inventory, and from a sponsor perspective, and happier fans, consuming all this content that for the most part wouldn't be distributed. And I know everyone listening knows there is a lot of content that doesn't get distributed. And so let's make that happen, and let's create better fan experiences and evolve the world of sport to become a better place to watch and enjoy.
Yeah, that's great. So, thanks for joining me. The conversation was fantastic. And again, content's king. Let's help everybody monetize that and get more out to the fans. And with that, I'll call it a wrap. Thanks again, Greg.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Evolution of Fandom. If you have any thoughts about what you've heard, we'd love to hear from you. Visit ComcastTechnologySolutions.com/fandom to get in touch, learn more, or subscribe to the series.
The views and opinions expressed by the individuals herein are their own and do not reflect any official policy or position of Comcast. These views and opinions are provided for illustrative purposes only, and Comcast makes no warranties, whether express, implied, or statutory, regarding or relating to the accuracy of such statements.